Imagine that you're sitting at your desk on a random Tuesday afternoon when your boss walks in with that look on their face. You know the one. The conversation that follows is tense, uncomfortable, and by the end of it, you're wondering if this job is even worth the paycheck anymore. But instead of that voice whispering that you can't afford to lose this position, you feel something different, something powerful, because sitting in your bank account right now is $10,000. That moment, that feeling is what we're talking about today, because saving $10,000 is a complete transformation of your relationship with work, risk, opportunity, and your own future. My name is Robert, and I spend an unhealthy amount of time thinking about money, financial psychology, and what separates people who build real wealth from those who stay trapped in the same exhausting cycle year after year. And I've got to tell you, $10,000 is a magic number that most people completely underestimate. Now, before we dive deep into why your future self will be sending you thank you notes for hitting this milestone, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a like on this video if you find it helpful. Trust me, the insights we're about to uncover are going to shift how you think about every dollar you earn from this moment forward. Let's start with something that doesn't get talked about enough: the psychology of having $10,000 saved. I'm not talking about just any $10,000, like money you're setting aside for a new car or a vacation. I'm talking about $10,000 that exists purely as a buffer between you and financial catastrophe. Research shows that having just $2,000 in emergency savings increases your financial well-being by a staggering 21%, only $2,000. That's less than what most people spend on holiday gifts and impulse purchases in a single year. But when you push that number up to somewhere between 3 and 6 months of living expenses, which for most people lands right around $10,000, you get another 13% boost in financial well-being. But the real transformation happens inside your brain. When you know that you're not one unexpected bill away from disaster, when you don't have money saved, your brain operates in what psychologists call survival mode. It's the same mental state our ancestors experienced when they didn't know where their next meal was coming from. Every financial decision gets filtered through this lens of fear and scarcity. You take the first job offer that comes along, even if the pay is insulting and the culture is toxic, because you simply can't afford to be selective. You stay in situations that drain your soul because leaving feels like jumping off a cliff without a parachute. You say yes to overtime you don't want, to projects that exploit you, to compromises that make you feel smaller, all because you need that next paycheck just to keep your head above water. Your brain is doing exactly what it's designed to do when resources are scarce, prioritizing immediate survival over everything else. It's like trying to plan a cross-country road trip while your car is actively on fire. Your mental bandwidth gets completely consumed by the immediate threat, leaving nothing left over for thinking about growth, opportunity, or building something better. But something remarkable happens when you cross that $10,000 threshold. Suddenly, your brain has space to breathe. Instead of asking yourself how you're going to survive until the next paycheck, you start asking how you can grow what you've built. Instead of being reactive to whatever financial crisis explodes into your life, you become proactive about creating wealth. You're not scrambling anymore. And that shift, that fundamental change in how your brain processes money and opportunity, is worth more than the $10,000 itself. Let me tell you about the career transformation that happens when you hit this milestone, because this is where things get really interesting. Having $10,000 saved changes your relationship with work in ways that can reshape your entire professional trajectory. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, you're essentially trapped. Your boss could be a nightmare, and your coworkers could be toxic. The work could be mind-numbing and soul-crushing, but you can't push back on unreasonable demands because deep down, everyone knows you need this job more than they need you. You're negotiating from a position of pure desperation, and that desperation seeps into every interaction, every performance review, every conversation about raises or promotions. But $10,000 changes the entire dynamic. Suddenly, you have what I call walking away money. You could quit tomorrow and survive for months while you find something better. Now, I'm not suggesting you should be reckless or burn bridges unnecessarily, but just having that option, just knowing you could walk away if you had to, that knowledge changes everything about how you show up at work. You start asking for the raise you deserve because the worst they can say is no, and you'll be fine either way. You push back on unreasonable requests because you're not afraid of the consequences. You explore new opportunities because you can afford to take some time between jobs if that's what it takes to find the right fit. Often, you don't even need to use your walking away money. Just having it changes your entire demeanor. You become more confident, more assertive, more willing to take on challenging projects because you're not operating from a place of fear. And guess what happens when you show up differently at work? People notice, and suddenly, you're getting better assignments, more recognition, and more money. It's a positive feedback loop that accelerates over time. The more confident you become, the more successful you are, which gives you even more financial cushion, which makes you even more confident. Meanwhile, your coworker who's still living paycheck to paycheck is stuck in the opposite loop, becoming more anxious and less effective as the pressure builds. Now let's talk about the mathematics of this whole thing, because while the psychology is powerful, the numbers tell their own compelling story. When you've got $10,000 sitting in a high-yield savings account earning, let's say, 4% annually, that's $400 flowing into your account every year without you lifting a finger. That's money you didn't have to earn through your job. Money that appeared simply because your existing money was working on your behalf. If you keep that $10,000 invested and it earns an average return of 8% per year, which is conservative for a diversified stock portfolio over the long term, after 10 years, that money grows to over $21,000. After 20 years, it balloons to over $46,000. After 30 years, you're looking at more than $100,000. Think about that for a second. You saved $10,000 once, then did absolutely nothing else, and 30 years later, it's worth 10 times more. That's just basic mathematics working in your favor while you go about your life. But most people never experience this magic because they never build that initial foundation. They're too busy living paycheck to paycheck, dealing with financial emergencies, paying interest on debt instead of earning it on investments. Once you have that $10,000 saved, your next $10,000 doesn't take nearly as long. Let's say you're putting away $834 per month, which is roughly what you need to hit $10,000 in a year. That first $10,000 is pure discipline and sacrifice. Every dollar is coming directly from your paycheck, from saying no to things you want, from making tough choices day after day. But your second $10,000 has a secret weapon. That first $10,000 is now earning returns alongside your monthly contributions. If you're getting an 8% annual return, that first $10,000 generates about $800 per year in growth. That's almost a full month of savings contributions you don't have to make because your money is making it for you. By the time you're going for your fifth or sixth $10,000, the acceleration becomes almost ridiculous. Your investments are doing an increasingly large share of the heavy lifting while you're putting in the same effort. That first milestone feels impossible when you're starting from zero, but every milestone after that gets progressively easier because compound interest is working harder for you with each passing year. Let's talk about what $10,000 means for your day-to-day mental health, because this is something that doesn't get nearly enough attention. According to recent data, 49% of Americans can't afford a $1,000 emergency. Nearly half the country is one broken transmission, one medical bill, one unexpected expense away from financial crisis. Think about what that does to your stress levels. Every time your check engine light comes on, every time you feel a weird pain in your chest, every time your kid needs something for school, there's this undercurrent of anxiety whispering that you can't handle it. You're constantly in a state of low-level panic, waiting for the other shoe to drop. The median emergency fund balance in America is $10,000. That means half of all Americans who have emergency funds saved have less than this amount. But financial experts generally recommend having 3 to 6 months of essential living expenses saved. For someone with $3,000 in monthly expenses, $10,000 covers just over 3 months. It's the minimum threshold where you can actually breathe, where an unexpected bill doesn't spiral into a choice between keeping the lights on and putting food on the table. When your car breaks down and is going to cost $2,000 to fix, instead of that familiar panic, instead of reaching for a credit card and paying 20% interest for the next year, you can just handle it. You pay cash, the problem gets solved, and you move on with your life. Maybe your savings takes a hit, but you're still standing. You're still solvent. You rebuild what you spent, and you're back to solid ground. The peace of mind this creates is hard to overstate. One woman who saved her first $10,000 described it this way. She said she finally understood what it meant to sleep soundly because she knew she could handle whatever came her way. That confidence, that deep sense of security, it changes how you walk through the world. You're not constantly braced for impact. You're not making decisions from a place of fear. You can actually think about what you want your life to look like instead of just trying to survive the week. Here's where having $10,000 starts to get really exciting. The opportunities you begin to see. When you're broke, every unexpected situation looks like a problem. When you have resources, those same situations start looking like opportunities. Your friend mentions they're launching a small business and looking for initial investors. Before, you would have thought that sounds interesting and then immediately moved on because it wasn't even a possibility. Now you can actually evaluate whether it makes sense to put $5,000 into something that might generate serious returns down the line. You're scrolling through listings and you see a rental property that needs some cosmetic work priced below market value because the seller needs to move quickly. Before, you would have felt envious and scrolled past. Now, you can run the numbers and see if this could be your entry point into real estate investing. Your company announces they're offering an intensive training program in another city that could accelerate your career, but they're not covering all the costs. Before, you would have made excuses about why you can't afford to go. Now, you can weigh the potential return on investment and make a strategic decision. This is what wealthy people mean when they say money goes to money. You can take calculated risks that broke people simply can't afford to take. You can invest time and money into learning new skills that increase your earning power. You can seize opportunities that appear and disappear quickly because you're not stuck waiting for your next paycheck. Also, you start caring less about small expenses and more about big ones. When you're broke, you obsess over every purchase. Should you buy the name brand or generic? Is it worth $3 for coffee when you could make it at home? Every micro decision consumes mental energy because every dollar feels precious. But when you have a solid financial foundation, you realize these tiny decisions are largely irrelevant. The difference between spending $3 on coffee versus making it at home is maybe $1,000 per year. If you're really going overboard, that's not nothing, but it's not going to make or break your financial future. What actually matters are the big decisions, where you choose to live, what you drive, how much you're saving every month, where you're investing your money. These choices can swing your net worth by tens of thousands of dollars over time. So instead of agonizing over whether to buy organic bananas, you focus your energy on optimizing your housing costs, maximizing your income, and making sure your investment strategy is solid. This shift in focus is incredibly liberating because it frees up mental bandwidth for the decisions that actually matter. You stop sweating the small stuff and start thinking strategically about wealth building. Let me tell you what it actually takes to save $10,000, because knowing why it matters is one thing, but understanding the path to get there is what separates dreamers from doers. If you want to save $10,000 in 1 year, you need to set aside roughly $834 every month. For some people, that's achievable with their current income and just requires some budget adjustments. For others, it might require both cutting expenses and finding ways to increase income. The first step is getting brutally honest about where your money is actually going. Track every expense for a month. Every coffee, every subscription service, every impulse purchase at Target. You're not judging yourself, you're just gathering data because you can't change what you don't measure. Once you see where the money is flowing, you start making strategic cuts. Maybe you realize you're spending $400 a month on food delivery and restaurants. Cutting that in half saves you $200 right there. Maybe you're paying for streaming services you barely use. Another $50 saved. Maybe you can refinance your car or negotiate your insurance rates. Every reduction in expenses gets you closer to that monthly savings goal. But sometimes cutting expenses isn't enough. Sometimes you need to increase the money coming in. That might mean asking for a raise, which suddenly feels more doable because you have that financial cushion building. It might mean picking up a side hustle, freelancing, selling things you don't need. Every extra dollar you bring in can be directed straight into savings. The absolute key to making this work is automation. Set up an automatic transfer from your checking account to your savings account the day after you get paid. $834, boom, gone before you can spend it on something else. Pay yourself first, as the financial gurus say, because if you wait until the end of the month to save whatever's left over, there will never be anything left over. Money has this magical way of disappearing when it sits in your checking account. But when it's automatically moved to savings before you can even think about spending it, it's out of sight and working toward your goal. Here's the beautiful thing about building toward $10,000. Every $1,000 you save makes the next $1,000 feel more achievable. Hitting your first $1,000 is a huge psychological victory. It proves to yourself that you can do this. By the time you hit $5,000, you're more than halfway there and momentum is building. When you finally cross that $10,000 mark, you've fundamentally changed who you are as a person. You've become someone who can delay gratification, who can stick with a goal even when it's hard, who has control over their financial life instead of feeling controlled by circumstances. Now imagine yourself 5 years from now. 10 years from now, 20 years from now. That future version of you, they're going to look back on this moment, this decision to start building that $10,000 foundation, and they're going to feel profound gratitude. Because that decision you made today changes the entire trajectory of your life. The future you isn't living paycheck to paycheck, constantly stressed about money, trapped in a job they hate because they can't afford to leave. The future you has options. They have security and peace of mind. They're building real wealth because they had the foundation to build on. They're taking opportunities that present themselves instead of watching them pass by. They're negotiating from a position of strength instead of desperation. They're sleeping soundly at night because they know they can handle whatever life throws at them. And it all started with $10,000, with the decision to stop letting life happen to you and start taking control of your financial future. Your future self is out there right now, waiting for you to make the choices today that will give them the life they deserve. Don't let them down. Start building that $10,000 foundation now, because every day you wait is another day you're stuck in survival mode. Instead of stepping into the life you're capable of living, the psychology will shift, the math will work in your favor, and the opportunities will appear. But only if you take that first step today. If this video helped you see money differently or gave you the motivation to start building your emergency fund, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel.